Good morning, everybody. My name is Rose Goslinga, and I am the co-founder and president of Pula. Today, I have the honor to speak to you about how farmers bounce back in the face of climate change and our partnership with Bayer that, as Michael just reminded me, started in 2017. And I'll jump ahead if I start talking about that, but let me start with this. I don't know if many of you know this, but currently in Southern Africa, farmers are experiencing one of the worst droughts in the last 15 years. In Zambia, Malawi, Zimbabwe, which are the breadbasket countries of East and Southern Africa, rains are usually starting in November, continue all the way through March. The rains in November allow the crops to germinate, and by the time that the rains stop in March, the crop only has to mature. But this year, in January, the rains disappeared and pretty much didn't come back. Crop never got above knee-high. Now, for some of you in the room, maybe drought isn't your most common phenomenon. I understand we're currently going through quite much the opposite. But for me personally, to think about drought, I only have to think back to my childhood. This is a picture of me, age 5, with my best friend Johnny. And my earliest childhood memory, of which there are no pictures, is of the two of us running around our house like crazy because we were getting drenched in this rain that has just started. It had been a really hot and dry period, and there's no picture of this but I only remember this feeling of running around, of happiness, because we were getting drenched in this rain. Now, at the same time, today I've developed an insurance company, or not an insurance company, we call it an insurtech. A company that develops insurance solutions that protect farmers against the risk of climate change. And no, this is not Johnny. This is my co-founder, Thomas Njeru. He's an actuary, I'm an economist. And we built, over the last 9 years, we built a company that has insured over 15 million farmers, works across 19 countries in Africa. And earlier this year, we announced our 20 million Series B. And given what we just talked about, or what I heard the panelists just saying, given that we raised $20 million, that means that the latest valuation of my company, I'm about to hide under the table, was about $100 million, which is slightly insane. We have generated over $70 million in premiums paid for by smallholder farmers and have paid out over $40 million. This is not taking into account this huge payout, which we're about to handle in Southern Africa. But at the same time, I will tell you that behind every shiny TechCrunch article, we have, at any point in time, at least a couple of times, nearly killed the business as well. As Michael was just saying, when we started the business and our first interaction with Bayer Foundation, we thought that we would develop a business that would package bags of seed and fertilizer together with insurance. We came up with a really neat, extremely tight solution. You would pack a bag of fertilizer, put a sticker on top, a farmer would register, satellite data would monitor if there was rain in their area, and if there wasn't, we would pay out within 48 hours. We executed it flawlessly. At the same time, we would collect data from those farmers, and that would enable seed companies and fertilizer companies to sell more to these. Sounds amazing, right? Now, the interesting thing when rubber hits the road is that when we were selling that bag of seed with the free insurance on top, the competitor was offering a bag of seed with a free t-shirt. And it doesn't take a genius to realize that a farmer would look at those two options and realize, hey, that t-shirt I can wear today, I'm not sure about insurance companies, let me take that option, right? That's the reality. So what sometimes looks like a really neat solution can kill your company unless you pivot. Now, that doesn't mean that farmers don't need insurance or that they don't have agricultural risk. I am a stats and insurance nerd, so bear with me through this presentation. I like numbers. What this graph shows you, all these gray bars are for a country of Zimbabwe, the droughts for the last 40 plus years. overlay that with maize yields, and you see that every time there's a drought, what happens is that maize yields drop. The more interesting thing, given that maize is such a huge contributor to the country, that it feeds the people, is if you overlay GDP data on that. Those orange graphs, every time they dip down, you'll see that it's pretty much even the year of a drought or the year following the drought. So if you think about what's going to happen in this drought in Southern Africa, it's a slow motion car crash that is going to affect Eastern Southern Africa. Now, at the same time, every time when I explain what my business does, people will tell me, well, isn't this just going to become more prevalent? I think a lot of you are familiar with this, what we call the Reading University stripes. And I think I love it because it really shows in a very tangible and intuitive way how temperatures have risen. Now, you can also show these Reading stripes per country, but also per continent. So this is what it looks like for Asia. And if you look at what it looks like for Africa, actually what you see is that this is a phenomenon that is not a future phenomenon. For the last 20 plus years, temperatures have already risen. Like, climate change is not a future, it is a current. And it's not even a current, it's part of our history current. Now, the good news is that this is not news. It is not news for the ministers of agriculture and finance in Africa and Asia. And what grew our business over time is that we partnered with them. We work together with governments that develop big agricultural programs that implement climate-smart agriculture, that implement subsidies for fertilizer and seeds so that farmers can adapt and can pay for inputs. We do that in Zambia, Nigeria, Kenya, Mozambique, Zimbabwe. And last year, over 4 million farmers only through this part of our business were insured. So now you get a government program that all of a sudden an investment of often between $50 to $200 million a year is actually made climate smart and climate resilient. What does this look like in practice? I'll take an example. The Pumvudza program, which Pumvudza means the new season, in Zimbabwe reaches over 1 million farmers a year, about 30% of the population. And how this was implemented before, that they were offering soil health and zero tilling. Zero tilling effectively means that instead of plowing the soil, you try to not disturb the soil too much so that you actually enable the soil to hold more moisture. They also gave farmers access to affordable inputs, seeds and fertilizer in a way, because farmers do know that they need these inputs. They'll tell you, I don't want them. But basically what they're not telling you is, I am poor, I cannot afford them. At the same time, when we talk to farmers and governments, they said, well, at the same time, in Zimbabwe, we know we have droughts. We know this is still rain-fed agriculture. So in 2021, we started a program together with the Bayer Foundation and the Mercy Corps AgriFin program to pilot embedded insurance into this government program. Now, this all sounds quite logical, and I always find that in hindsight, everything sounds logical. But I do want to take you back for a moment to explain to you why this hasn't happened a lot before. Now, historically, agriculture insurance has actually struggled to reach smallholder farmers. An average US farmer has about 180 hectares, pays insurance premiums worth about $15,000 a year, and has a productivity about 11 metric tons per hectare. Now, in such a case, it's actually possible, perfectly possible, to send a loss assessor to a farm at the start of the season, at the end, and if there is a claim, you can send them again. You can pay for that from the premiums. Our average Pula farmer last year had 0.9 hectares, paid $10 of premium a season, and their productivity was only 2 metric tons per hectare. So you realize there's a factor 1,000 difference there. So you really have to think quite differently about how you're going to approach serving those kind of farmers. So how does our product work? We literally, from when we start, we redraw the map of a country. Using satellite, remote sensing, and machine learning algorithms, we redraw the map of a country, developing what we call agroclimatic zones, where the climate is going to be quite similar. Per agroclimatic zones, we send our agent to literally harvest on 35 to 50 farms. If the harvests from those 35 to 50, which are seen to be statistically and representative, given that they're random and given that the climate is similar, if the yields for that particular year are below the historical benchmark, all the farmers in that location get a payout. That enables us to actually serve farmers at scale. Now that's a shortcut saying, because when we started this product, which is called a yield index in 2015, people told me this was unscalable. One of our reinsurance partners, Swiss Re, told me, this has been tried in India, Rose. You will just have a lot of fraud. All these people running around doing yield measurements, that won't work. I would say here the answer really lies in technology. We have, at this point, at any point in time, 1,500 fully digitized agents that go around, they have our application, and they do rote tasks. They are from the area, and we ask them to do things that they already know. We ask them to harvest, and we ask them to use their own smartphone to do some data entry for us. They are familiar to the area, they speak the language. Because they're from the area, they gain the trust of farmers. And because they're from the area, they can travel short distances. They use their own smartphone, and all of us, that keeps the cost low for us to actually execute such a program. The data flows through us and goes through about 150 plus automated data checks. And this is really important because our data needs to be trusted by insurers and reinsurers who are going to pay on basis of our payout reports. So it pretty much needs to be bulletproof. The other thing that we did in our business is that we realized that we could not sell to farmers directly. And therefore, we do not, as a business, sell to farmers directly. Often that's the first question people ask me. So, but farmers won't understand insurance. And then for the next 15 minutes, I'll be explaining, no, so we don't sell to farmers directly. We sell to governments, banks, development institutions, organized groups that already have activities with smallholder farmers. On average, they come as a group, on average about 120,000 farmers. Our clients include the government of Zambia, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Nigeria, as well as development institutions like the WFP, IFAD, agri-techs like Apollo, and increasingly also food companies like Mondelez and Barry Callebaut. Our business model, how do we actually make money? Because as you said, you want to have businesses, I heard Adam Bola say that, you want to see businesses that make millions of dollars. We make tens of millions of dollars. We have to make money, right? So we charge about a 20% fee for our service on every dollar of premium generated. We, as I said, because we don't sell to customers directly, we sell to businesses, so B2B, or B2G, so business to government. That is hard. It takes a long time to develop such a deal, anywhere between 9 to 36 months. But it's also worth it. We've been profitable for the last 2 years. It's the only reason I think I could raise money in the last environment. You have to show profitability. Now, when we started working with the Bayer Foundation in Zimbabwe, what did we really do? What did their money really pay for? What did it unlock? For $4 a farmer, Bayer got 30,000 farmers free insurance. But it's not just about getting farmers free insurance so they can try it out and believe it. It's also about working with the government agencies and the partners so that they understand it. We built the capacity of 6 government agencies, insurers, and regulators. Building capacity is one of those words that I sometimes struggle with. But it basically means holding a lot of workshops, trainings. Add to that a bit of bad luck. Now, this might not make a lot of sense, but insurance is only trusted in the moment that there is a payout. So bad luck or a drought, in this case, was good luck for us. The drought that we held a payout ceremony. You see these huge checks. I have lots of pictures of me handing out big checks to farmers. This payout made national TV, the front page news, and it meant that people started believing in it. We followed up with even more workshops. We held exchange visits to other countries, trainings. And I would say at the top of it, we always talk about entrepreneurship, that it's about persistence, right? And I would say persistence pays. In late 2023, the government budgeted to insure 1 million farmers. What did this mean? The initial investment of the project that we did with the Bayer Foundation was about $200,000, insured 30,000 farmers. And so this season, the 2023-2024 season, the government is paying $6.5 million for insurance premiums and insuring 1 million farmers, which means that we do that thing that we often talk about, catalytic, right? What does catalytic really mean? Catalytic in this case meant that the Bayer funding catalyzed a 32 4x effect in public sector investment. Now I say this because I think, I want to emphasize that this was a very courageous decision of the team from the Mercy Corps AgriFin program and the Bayer Foundation. Because remember, we are running a program in Zimbabwe with an African government that is mostly associated with mismanagement, failing currencies, long-running dictatorship. Like, it's not the obvious decision to make, to do a program together with a government like that, right? But I think we forget that in these countries, we have millions of smallholder farmers that live there. They need to make a living, and that living comes from their farms. So I think a decision that may look very obvious in hindsight, I think we should always recognize that real change comes from when we have a good amount of courage and take very unobvious decisions. Now, that other unobvious decision is actually running an insurance program. Why would you add insurance? What kind of evidence is there even in insurance? I remember people at Mercy Corps, particularly Lisa, always telling me, you need to show evidence. And insurance, that takes time. We are now starting to see that kind of evidence. I'm going to show you a bit about what I mean when I say when farmers bounce back. I'm hoping it's going to work. For Zambia, what we experienced, and now we have like 4 or 5 years of data in a couple of countries. In 2019 and 2020, yields were pretty decent. But 2021, particularly in the eastern area, they had a drought, and that triggered a payout. And what you see in the following year, 2022, is that farmers bounce back. We're not just seeing that in Zambia, we're also seeing it in Senegal. Peanut farmers had a flood. You see the 2021 yield, a payout in 2022, and their 2023 yield able to bounce back. Same in Kenya, where they had 2 subsequent bad years, and farmers were able to get back to where they were in 2020. When they were in 2023, they get back to where they were before. Now, this for me is what really, like, over the next couple of years, we'll get more and more of this data that will tell us, this is what resilience to me really should mean and what it should look like. I don't even think this is really an African problem. As said, I am an insurance and history nerd, so allow me to take you to US farm yields. Allow me to take you to 1870. I'm going to show you yields in the US between 1870 and 1930. And what should strike you is that actually yields are extremely volatile and about the 2 metric ton mark, which is what African yields are currently at. Now, what also happened in 1930 is that you had a huge crisis, the Dust Bowl drought, which I didn't know lasted 8 years. And that kind of crisis is what actually then really changed agricultural, or really caused agricultural reform in the US. And what you see after that is quite stunning. So look at this. So you see US farm yields, right? Kind of even hitting close to 0 in some years. Then you hit the Dust Bowl drought in 1930. 1938, they set up the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation, which, what happens here, right? You see these huge increases over time. And what do I say here? What I mean here to say, this is not only about insurance. Obviously, we have a lot of agricultural people in the room who are about to tell me about seeds and fertilizer. But it does tell you something. You need a level of stability in your system for farmers to make those investments. Courage and a crisis. Now, what we see now at the moment, I think we are in such a situation where climate is causing a lot of crises. But at the same time, I'm very positive because we're in conversations with governments in Mali, Nigeria, Kenya, in Pakistan and Bangladesh, and we see big investments being driven by these markets. At the same time, adding insurance isn't a natural thing for them. None of the programs here have any kind of insurance embedded to them. Our task is, by 2030, to add additional, at least annually, another 10 million farmers to this. I would say that by now, we have a pretty good sense of what agriculture or agricultural adaptation to climate change should look like. It's a combination of good agricultural practices, those things, like, to some extent quite boring, good seed, fertilizer, PPPs with government. This may be the kind of thing that people don't talk about that much, but is incredibly important. Add insurance to that. I think, in the next couple of years, 10 million, if not 30 million farmers could become resilient through combinations like this. I'm going to leave you with a picture of the future. This is my daughter. Like me, she is growing up in Africa. This is her best friend, Wanjiku. And this may come as a surprise to you. I do not want her to start a business in climate change and insurance. I want us to have solved this problem, and I want her to decide to solve a new problem, right? But what I do think is that that will require all the people in this room to make those very bold, audacious, sometimes kooky bets. Because my gut feeling tells me is that those kooky and audacious bets are what will actually work. And I'm pretty sure, or my feeling is that we owe it to our daughters and sons to make those bets. Thank you.